Yeah, we're live.
I don't see the thing.
Oh, it says live on mine.
Oh, well, should I start talking or should we wait?
No, I think you should start talking because it says live on mine.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Diploma Sports, a clunky, intelligent intersection of politics and sports. My name is SC, the one with the bleeding heart. Joining me today is my friend Ghost, the lovable libertarian. Uh, for those of you who don't know, we tend to disagree on politics. We actually did record this whole show, arguing about these particular topics, but we just forgot to record it. So this is take two. Uh, this is going to give us some really good chances to explore a couple of really important issues to both of us. So let's get started. But before we begin, Ghost, how can our follower find us?
As always, you can find us on our various social media platforms. You can find us on Facebook at Diploma Sports. You can find us on Twitter, Gab, and Minds at Diploma_Sports. And of course, you can find our WordPress blog where you can read articles from us on at Diploma Sports.
Yeah,
WordPress, right?
I believe so. I should really know that. Yes, it is diplomasports.wordpress.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but if you just go to our YouTube page or follow us on Facebook and Twitter, try to like and share our stuff so we can get more people in on the conversation. What we ultimately would like is a lot of my people who think in see the world in the way that I do, responding one way, and the way that ghosts people think, responding in their way, and we get some arguments going. Obviously respectful. Let's always keep it respectful. No, not too much name calling, but that's what we want here. We want a informed, open, intellectual discussion around some really important and really complicated issues. So we are going to touch on two of them today. We're going to talk about well, actually, here, Ghost, I'll let you introduce the topic you want to talk about. We'll tease that, and then we'll jump into our first issue.
Well, the later plan is obviously going to be a discussion about free speech on YouTube, Google, Facebook, and Twitter, and various other platforms, and I guess I could say, attempts to control and construct narratives on those platforms and direct discussion and intellectual discovery on those platforms. But yes, first, I'll let SC introduce our first topic.
All right. So yeah, and that is a very important issue as well. So stay tuned. Today we're going to dive into the issue of gender, and more specifically, the transgender in the military issue. This was certainly one of those hot button issues that people were talking about. There was a lot of public outrage over the president's tweet in support of banning military service for transgender individuals. Before we get into the crux of this, because I don't really want to talk too much about Trump and what he's doing, but we'll just make one thing clear that that the military has not actually started this ban yet. This was just his twittering, if you will. It does not actually happen until the president puts in an official order, which at this point I'm still of the knowledge that he has not done so yet. Doesn't mean he won't. Doesn't mean that this isn't still harmful, and a variety of other things. But again, I don't really want to focus too much on Trump. I really want us to actually kind of look at the issue of gender. Let's look at the issue of what transgender people are going through, and kind of some of the fallacies that the right and the left both have in regard to this issue.
Well, I also want to make very clear that this is actually a return to the policy of 2015. And whether or not you agree or disagree with it, you have to remember that the previous president let this policy go on for the past 7 years. And to just quickly get into kind of the politics of this, just very quickly, I just want to kind of step on this.
Yeah, violence.
Is
Yeah.
that I think this is actually a brilliant political strategy. I think it's the most intelligent thing in the long term or the most intellectual thing to do? Not necessarily, but the announcement of this strategy was right when the Democratic Party announced their better deal policy. So essentially, the Democrats were trying to move more towards economics and what was going on in the real world. And the brilliance of this announcement is that it forces them to get back into the social issues, many of which led to their loss in 2016. So
And that's
kind
a
of,
fair point. No, that's and that's
it's
actually something
cynical,
that
I
I think I
know,
could say.
but
No, and to be fair, just to touch on this real quick, we're getting off topic, but I think this is an important point for the two of us to discuss, considering, as the audience knows, my friend here is a Trump supporter, and I am obviously not. He is, in a way, really smart at when things seem to actually serious things seem to come up, whether it's the economy or war or a variety of different issues. He seems very, very good at just all of a sudden we're talking about something that has absolute, well, it doesn't, it has thing. Let's be clear. This issue is very important to a very small portion of society, and I believe we should champion these people and try to listen to them and learn from their experiences. But in the end, transgender in the military is not something that that the far majority of voters necessarily have a stake in. It's a thing to rile up people on the left. It's a thing to kind of rile up people on the right. It's the thing to cause internet chats and make all these arguments, but it's not. And again, it's not like he actually passed changed the policy yet. And to Ghost's point, Democrats have not been good champions of the LGBTQ community as much as they like to pretend like they're the ones. They were still late to the party as well. Most of us believed in gay marriage before Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama did. So, Ghost, I'm sure you're happy with me for saying that.
It's my submission, but
I have to admit it's definitely true. There's no denying that Democrats have not come to play. You know, they may be safe face, but they haven't actually come to play. Republicans obviously aren't any better, but nonetheless, let's not pretend like this is Democrats. You know, you're a Democrat. You stood behind transgender people this whole time. There's a lot of misconceptions held on the left as well. But we'll get into all that.
And lastly, it's also a budgetary issue, I think, because the reality, before we get into the issue of transgenders himself, the reality is that when we have a soldier, no matter who they are, we agree to take care of them, no matter what, because we're agreeing to break these people. We're agreeing to send them into an environment where it's likely they will either be dead, destroyed, or worse. And the problem with having transgenders enter the military is that by them entering, we are saying we are going to make them well. We are going to use every penny available to us to fix them, even if their problem is beyond what happened on the battlefield, because they could always just say, look, there was a grenade that went off and it triggered me so much that I'm not saying that's what someone's going to do, but I'm saying that is part of the responsibility of our military, is to make them well, no matter what the circumstances is. And it's a very expensive procedure and it could easily be abused. I'm not saying that everyone's going to jump in the military to get transitioning surgery, but that's kind of also the politics behind this as well, is that it's an expensive procedure and we have an obligation to fix the people we break.
That is a fair point, and also the point that you brought up to me when we were discussing this before we went live, or our first, what we should have recorded as our first discussion about this. We don't allow everybody in the military. There are a lot of restrictions towards people serving, you know, whether, like you said, being too short, you know, certain sort of mental or physical illnesses. You know, not everybody can serve, even though it is a volunteer driven. And obviously, if we get into World War III, we probably won't be as picky or things like that. But that's a whole other discussion for another time. The reality is if you can prove to me that this person is, who is suffering from gender dysphoria, who is transgender, who is gender nonconforming, or a variety of these different terms that I encourage everybody to look up, because there's a lot of them and we don't have time to go through all of them. But if you can prove that person is either capable or incapable, I think that should really be the only thing that comes down to. I think the main problem with this policy in general is that it does discriminate. Even if you can say that, even if you make the argument to me that 90% of these individuals who are transgender are incapable of fighting in combat, that is still isolating 10%. And if you're going to have an intense screening process, it shouldn't be an automatic disqualifier. That's my point.
Well, what I'm saying is that the military does discriminate. That's very much in choosing their candidates. We discriminate so we can put the best soldiers out there. Now, exactly,
but I'm not saying that. I'm saying that some transgender people are still able to be the best soldiers, and I think that's where this becomes a bad taste in my mouth. If you can prove to me that 100% if you're transgender, if you suffer from this, or if you are going through this, it's not, I don't think it's a disease, so it's not like you're suffering from it. But if you're someone who assigns this way, or someone who feels differently about their gender and how they identify, or is going through transition, if you can prove to me that every single one of these individuals cannot serve, and there's no way they'll be harmed to their allies or they're harmed to their fellow soldiers, then fine. It's the same thing with the gay argument, though. There was never any actual proof of that.
Well, I think the gay argument is very different. I think that keeping
but
gays,
it's the same kind of tactics used. It's all.
No, I know, but
it's the same kind of tactic.
But I'm just saying that keeping gays out of the military didn't make sense, because there's not, like, people who aren't gay don't go through a hormonal procedure to change themselves. They don't do things that affect the physiological components of their body. And not all of them do, obviously. But I'm saying that there's not a common practice in the gay community of changing oneself to such a degree.
And I get that. And again, so yeah, let's kind of start from the beginning, and then we can kind of circle around and touch up on the military. Because like I said, I think there is a whole lot of nuance on this issue for people on both the right and the left to agree on, because it should be a meritocracy. It should be like everything, or everything that we want in this society is, if you're good enough and you're able to fill the position and do the job right, then you should have that right to do it. I think both of us clearly agree on that. So that's where the discussion lies, and that's where I think a tweet like this is not necessarily, while it might be political genius to a certain extent, that's the part that becomes harmful, because I think it does stoke a lot of flames of people who don't really understand the issue. And I'm not saying you're one of those people, but there are people that just blatantly don't understand the issue, the concept, or even have never talked or met anybody who's transgender. I want to qualify this whole thing as saying that both Ghost and I are both straight males. We are quote unquote normal as far as that is concerned. So both of us are coming at this from a perspective of something that we could never really relate to. Both of us have both been pretty content in both our sexual orientation and who we are, that we're men. We we're men. That's just, there's no way around it. And that is something that I think a lot of people, they have that and they come at it from their sensibilities and their perspective, and they end up just being ignorant about a particular issue. So let's just I want to just start. I'm going to read. This is from all these sources I got from a pro-LGBT community website. They are called GLAAD. It's GLAAD.org if you want to find more information. I'm guessing from your response that you're not too fan of their organization, but nonetheless, this is just data. This is just facts. So this is not about the organization or anything. This is just what I'm reading. And actually, this is also from Wikipedia too, which is a fine enough source unless you're writing a college paper. Just saying. Okay, so what is gender versus sex? Because I think this is an important distinction. And just let me finish it, and then you can critique me on as far as whatever you disagree with it. But we'll just read the basics, and then we'll build from there. The distinction between gender and sex differentiates sex, the anatomy of an individual's reproductive system, and secondary sex characteristics. So, what you have, a penis or a vagina, or do you grow large amounts of facial hair, things like that, secondary sex characteristics. From gender, which can refer to either social roles based on the sex of a person, their gender role, or personal identification of one's own gender based on an internal awareness, which is your gender identity. So you wake up every morning, if you're a man, you feel like a man. Sometimes people don't have that, and it's kind of hard to grasp that as somebody who has never felt that way. But there are people who wake up every day and don't feel like they're in the right body. In some circumstances, an individual's assigned sex and gender do not align, and that person may be transgender, non-binary, or gender non-conforming. Again, there's differences between all these things, but look up the definitions on your own because we don't have time. In some cases, an individual may have biological sex characteristics that complicate sex assignment, and these people may be intersex. And in fact, 1 out of every 100 person is born intersex, where at a young child they have either both organs, or they have some sort of disbalance on that. And oftentimes it's up to the parent to decide at a very young age which direction they're going to go in, and sometimes they're wrong, and sometimes they choose, it's going to be a son, and actually they should have done more. There was more hormones and more chromosomes in the other, or not chromosomes, but more hormones in the other direction, and that's where some of this happens. And obviously, this is a very small portion of the community. This is not, there's not, this is not Alex Jones drinking water. People are becoming transgender. This is not. There's nothing like that.
That's only frogs.
Whatever, but you get my point. It was not as great of a joke.
I know.
But anyways, yeah, this is not a phenomenon that all of a sudden there's people everywhere that are deciding that they're not. These are a very small portion of people, but nonetheless they are often victimized. The last thing I want to read, because this is also important as well, and then we'll just kind of discuss it from here, is that it is very dangerous to be a transgender person in this society. Since January 1st, 2017, 8 transgender women of color alone have been murdered. 29% of the transgender community live in poverty, compared to 14% of the general population. 30% of transgender people report being homeless at the same point in their lives, with 12% saying it was within the last 12 months. Transgender people experience employment at 3 times the greater rate. 30% of transgender people report being fired, denied a promotion, or experience mistreatment due to their gender identity. 31% of transgender people experienced mistreatment in the last year. 21% verbally harassed. 40% respondents attempted suicide. So it's not, these people are, while we might not fully understand, and grasp what this means for them internally, what demons, what they're wrestling with, it is obviously clear that there is it is dangerous to either transition or to have any sort of these doubts, to not just fit in your place and to really try to actually live out your life how you actually feel it's, you're supposed to be. Um, and and I think, to me, that just seems terrible, because even if we don't think that this is, even if you think that this is some sort of a disorder, or if you think that this is something that just, oh, tough it out, you were born this way, um, it is something that in America you should be able to take control of your own lives. And so let's just start with that.
I want to clarify one statistic. You said 26% reported verbal abuse.
24%.
Wow, that's pretty low. No offense to what happened to them, but honestly, I mean, I just
Well,
think about
2% were physically attacked. I guess that's the more.
yeah, that one that's worse. But I'm just saying 24% verbal abuse. I feel like that should be much higher. No, not that I would make fun of them for being transgender. I'm just like, I mean, I don't feel like you could get
You
if
managed to find the one silver lining on all of those grim
well,
statistics there, right?
let me finish. Like, if I had 100 children and they saw a man dressed as a woman, I do not think less than a quarter of them would make fun of them. I think it'd be much more. I think it'd be much more because children are shitty people.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And that's a whole, and the whole thing about being a kid. So I do first before we get into the specifics of the things I want to talk about this. Do you have anything you want to comment on all of the plethora of things I just said?
So the whole idea of finding the distinction between gender and sex, yeah, I get it. I get it. The reality is your sex is set in stone when you're born. It's your XX chromosome, XY chromosome, and the gender sex argument. I don't really care for intersex people. That they are not transgendered people. First of all, they are people who have a more ambiguous gender. It's a completely different issue with intersex.
Okay, and that's fair. I think there's certainly some nuance there that I can certainly understand what,
yeah,
what you're saying.
that's like their biological makeup is just physically different. But what we're talking about with transgender are people who do not feel the way that their organs or the way that their chromosomes are, right?
Essentially, that they look in the mirror and they don't see the person that they think they're actually supposed to be.
Okay.
That
And
they
then,
feel at the recesses of their soul that who they are. This isn't just I want to be a man one day. This is something that they've been experiencing even from as early on as the ages of like 3 or 4.
okay. I just wanted to clear that up. And another thing you said that kind of didn't really jive with me is you said that you wake up every day and you feel like a man. And for me, it was just kind of like I wake up every day and I feel like me. I don't specifically go, yes, I have a penis and I've got a Y chromosome and this is why I do what I do. It's kind of just like, oh, another day.
Well, and that's fair. And I'm not saying that I wake up every day and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a man. Like, but I'm just saying that I'm comfortable with my gender, with my societally assigned gender, assigned role, and I fit into that perfectly fine. I have no quorums with that in the morning. The thought never really occurs in my mind. So to your point, you're actually right. It never crosses my mind because I never have to think about it because I just am who I am.
Okay, I just wanted to because that doesn't really cross my mind. I just didn't want to be like tacitly agreeing by not touching on the issue.
Yeah, no, and that's fair, and yeah, that's it's. I certainly agree with that critique. It's not specifically like, it's just the same thing too. With far as it's just a whole summary of what your identity is. Basically, is what I was getting at, and who you feel. So I guess let's start with the whole. What we were talking about, there are 2 extremes to this issue on the right and the left. My problem with the left, first off, is the left tends to coddle people. Let's not beat around the bush. The left does not like to call out Islam for jihadists because it doesn't want to be viewed as like the other side. They're timid. The left is timid on a lot of these issues in a lot of ways. And obviously I'm generalizing here, but there is a fair amount of leftist people who, rather than if someone was to come up to them and say, I feel like my gender identity does not match what my sex organs are, their immediate response would be much more radical than, say, just a simple discussion about, how are you feeling? How long have you felt this? Can we chart this? What are some other possible options? I think it's clear, or it's important to note to the audience that not every person that's transgender is going through radical sex change operations or getting, massive amount of hormone displacement or anything like that. There's some people that just simply are trying to live, dress, look a different way that isn't super harmful to their overall anatomy. But what happens is that kids in general, and young adults and people in general that suffer trauma don't understand that there's a variety of options and can sometimes go to a much more radical extreme than what is actually necessary for them to find happiness or find themselves or find self-identity. And the left doesn't do a good job because they so desperately don't want to be transphobic, so desperately don't want to be viewed as somebody who's anti the transgender community, that they can't speak some hard truths about this. And that maybe somebody who is 14, who is going through these doubts, should be examined a little bit further and not just jump to such radical measures. And I think you can agree with me on that, right?
Yeah, I think honestly, I'm not saying we can't teach children about what it means to be transgender. I mean, personally, I wouldn't bother with it. I wouldn't put that on a child. It's like I wouldn't. I think it introduces too much in the minds of, like, I mean, when I was a kid, I was always an edgy teenager, and I always wanted to say, controversial and difficult stuff, and just stuff to just sound cooler than I actually am. And like I could see a kid hearing about, oh, well, that sounds absolutely ridiculous, and like the most edgy thing I've ever heard is denying what you are denying your gender. Like I could see someone pushing through on that. I'm not saying everyone will, but I mean, if by teaching one child about this, that they accidentally went through with the process without thinking it through, and essentially sterilized themselves and maimed themselves permanently, I feel like that's one too many.
And I agree, and that's again my critique on the left about it. But then the other extreme is to just meet it with complete hostility. There are people who legitimately have these sort of inklings. This is not, there's the people who didn't just wake up and decide they're just going to be a punk ass kid that just decides to do this and that. So for those people, and again, this is a very small portion of people in society, but for those people, I just think we need to come at it from more of a just kind of listen to people. That's all I'm saying. And I think in a lot of issues, this is the case, both right or left. I think we really don't listen to people. We don't actually, we just come in with our own biases. And we just think that we understand the world the way it is, when in reality, this is a very, very complicated issue. And the science is not complete on this. There's constantly new information coming in. And I just don't think we can be dogmatic about this at all, and on the right or the left.
Well, I think the problem that goes on is that the right has kind of fallen into the trap of thinking that by okaying something, you are making it moral. Like if something's legal, it's moral. This is why the right is so against abortion. This is why the right is so against the transition itself, is that they think that by the government allowing people to make these decisions about themselves, is that the government is dictating what is moral, because many people on the right are religious and they believe that well, I mean, this is just me interpreting because I'm not a
drugs too. I mean, it's the same kind of thing.
Drugs too, but by legalizing things is, they believe in like the divine law of gods, and they follow the 10 Commandments, and they do things because they think it's moral.
Well, and it does say in the Bible that you're supposed to follow the laws of the land. Like, yeah. You're not supposed to speed if you're a Christian, even though most Christians still speed. I mean, that's just the reality of it.
But this is my point, is that they associate the legality of people doing the transition. I don't think people should do it myself, but I don't think people should be prohibited from doing it. But they see this allowance, and they see gay marriage as well as this allowance as in making things moral. And me, I don't care if gays want to get married. I'm not looking at it as a moral issue. I'm looking at it as they're individuals. They can do what they want. But,
well, and also I think it's important to note you're young. You have a relatively open mind when it comes to this issue, where somebody who's 70 who never met a transgender person their whole life, went their whole life thinking a certain way, is looking at this issue and going, what the hell? No, this person is just like the weird kid or whatever. They're not.
We don't.
The more you learn about,
saying we don't mutilate the weird kids, okay? Like that's the way they're looking at it, and there's
exactly, and they're not, and it's not that they're. It is just ignorance when it comes down to it, or just a lack of understanding. It's not necessarily their fault, but that is something that transgender people have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, is people who just blatantly don't understand their struggle or their life. And I will say, I've met one transgender person in my life, and they were very impressive. They started out, I met them at the beginning of the year, and they were identified as a woman, and by the end of the year, they identified as a man, and they were going through hormonal changes. And there was nothing not impressive about this individual person, who obviously won't speak according to name because it's not cool to do that necessarily. But very impressive individual who did nothing but advocate for students and did nothing but champion causes that I believed in. And that's somebody that I would think it would be a slap in the face to say that they couldn't serve in the military. That's somebody that if they chose that, and this person would definitely not have chosen that life, but if there's somebody who wanted to do that, if their whole family was in the military and they had that sense of pride, it just seems wrong to me to go at it, oh, they just can't serve, because in the end, it's not. In the end, that's somebody that I believe is capable, despite everything that's going, despite all the other differences. And I don't think that's somebody that would endanger their fellow soldier. And that's why there's so much outcry for this, because there are individuals who have served in the military who are transgender who just, you know, think, screw you. Like, I fought for my country. When did you ever? Like, there is legitimacy there too as well. But
well, let me just be. Let me elaborate though a little bit. I mean, I think one of the core components of kind of the opposition to leftism in this day is kind of the anti-identitarian movement. It's kind of like, look, we don't care if you're gay, we don't care what color you are, we don't care what your gender is, we care what you do. And it sounds to me a lot that your friend, that they, or I'm not going to bother with pronouns, I'm just going to say they for now, they impressed you by what they did, and it didn't matter what their gender was or how they identified. That it sounds like they as an individual were impressive enough that it doesn't matter who they what their identity was. What matters is what they did, right?
Exactly. And that's why
at the end of the day, I think that's what we all want to do. We want to judge people by what they do, not what they are.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And I think, and I do somewhat agree with the critique that identity politics is not an effective strategy for Democrats to win elections. It just it doesn't seem like it's, you know, I believe we should be intersectional as far as the left as a whole. We should understand the struggles and strifes of every class, of every individual, of every type and group. But nonetheless, I don't think strategically wise, Democrats keep falling into the same trap as well. And they're not getting any new voters. But that's a whole other discussion for another time.
Yeah, that's another discussion.
So yeah, I think, just to kind of sum up everything that I'm saying, I think that what people need to do is, before you just assume that you understand this kind of an issue, just do a little research. Just read up on it. You know, it's not going to be easy for you to meet a transgender person, but if you take that opportunity, just have a conversation with them. That's an individual or a group of people that are really just desperately asking for somebody to understand their life, understand their struggle, what they're going through. And you might not believe it totally. You might have your doubts and think that, you know, this is some sort of a mental disorder, or you might think that there's some sort of weird how they were raised, or, you know, variety of issues. I'm not going to argue about those specifics at this point. It's not important. The point is that this is a group of individuals in society that is disproportionately negatively affected by society in general. And I don't think it's necessarily fair, and I think that it is, you know, just do a little bit of research, just read about it before you start, because this manifests itself negatively with the bathroom ban, with obviously this military tweet, and there's a number of issues, whether it's the suicide rates and all the things that I read, that manifests itself because we have a lack of understanding about the people in this community. And if you are for LGBTQ rights, one of those letters is T, is transgender individuals. So.
Okay, well, I hate to interrupt it, but I don't generally consider the T and LGBT as part of it. I'm generally more of just LGB. Those are the three orientations, and that's that group itself. I think transgender is a whole other issue. I think, unfortunately, it is a mental disorder. It is a condition of the mind that affects the way one thinks about their own body. That doesn't mean we have to be cruel to these people. That doesn't mean we have to prejudge them or anything, obviously. But I think at the end of the day, it is a mental condition, and I want to know how it works. I want to fully understand it, but the problem is even science doesn't fully understand the condition because it's a psychological disorder of sorts.
And
and I think that, you know, yes, don't accept that. Don't just say that, you know, because the government says it, it's moral to do this. You know, I mean, more importantly, a lot of times it doesn't matter what is and isn't moral for certain things like this, with individuals making decisions about themselves, you know. And I think that, no, we should not teach children about this, because I think children are not capable of making these decisions. I try to remember my prepubescent self. Was I capable of making a decision about, oh, I want to be a man when I grow up? Or, like, I think about those things. I think it's child abuse to teach children about the transgender issue and be super supportive of, say, you find your son wearing a dress going, oh, we got to get him on hormone blockers before it's puberty, or, oh, we got to start the transition right now. Otherwise, we're going to be immoral and transphobic. And I think in the UK, there was a judge, I think, was ordering parents to give their children hormone blockers. And I think that the government has no place to make that decision. I think everyone should be forced to go through puberty. It sounds cruel to someone that's transitioned, but I think your brain isn't fully developed till you're 25. You should at least have to have your sexual organs be developed before you make a decision about the transition itself anyway.
Yeah, and I think I agree with the far majority of what you're saying. There's a few things that I touch on, but we don't necessarily need to go back. I think what you're saying overall is valid. I think we ultimately still don't understand a whole lot about it. I mean, this is, and again, both of us, straight white males. Obviously, the white part doesn't really matter, but we're both straight males at this point. So we are coming at this from simply reading things online, and in my case, meeting one transgender person. So it's not like we're coming.
Well, I listened to a transgender YouTuber a few times before this. The lady Blair White, I think, she's popular because she's more right leaning than most people in the transgender community. But
well, I mean, not Kendall. Caitlyn Jenner is very right leaning, which is weird. Caitlyn Jenner. Well, yeah. Oh, never mind. We don't really need to mention her more than that. The point is that just take a moment before you say anything harsh or mean, to just kind of think about it from their perspective. That's all I ask. I don't expect you to I'm not even saying you, I'm saying the audience, conservatives, the people as a whole. Just take a moment. And if you're on the left, be a little bit more wary of the fact that these are kids and that this is a very complicated issue, and also don't just run to say anything extreme. Let's just, I know it's boring, but let's just try to meet a little bit in the middle here. Because this is one of those issues that's too important to be completely ideologued about it, and to allow yourself to continually get new information, because new information is constantly going to come in about this. Our view of this is going to completely change in 10 years. So just continue to just learn and develop your opinions as you continue to learn more. That's all I ask. So I think I'm good on this topic. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I just, people on the right, or people who believe in morality or think that, there's a moral tint to this. Remember, the government does not make things moral. Teach your children the right values, but, tolerating people who are different or transgender does not mean you're telling your family, your children, or your faith that these people are, the ideal way to deal with a certain issue. Remember, psychotherapy is important for everyone. If they have problems, and try to be compassionate to these people, because there is something, I hate to use this term because it sounds so dismissive, but there is something, I guess, wrong with them, something abnormal, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just just show some compassion for that, as you would anyone that has an issue of any kind.
Yeah, it's complicated. Just it's complicated. It's and people are complicated. We're all very complicated individuals.
We're all a complicated mess, is what it comes down to.
Yes. So all right. So let's transition seamlessly into breaking news. Hurrah! I don't know if you've read this, but I'm hoping that I'm surprising you this live on the air. The Dolphins have signed Jay Cutler to a 1-year deal.
Looks like we found our Ryan Tannehill replacement.
And it's not Colin Kaepernick, but that's a whole other discussion for another time. So, what are your thoughts on the Jay Cutler ruining your team this year? And then we'll transition to a more important topic. Well, I just want to talk about this real quick with you.
According to Bleacher Report, Ryan Tannehill's knee was a ticking time bomb, and it just went off, and we are screwed.
Yeah, you're screwed.
we're screwed. We're boned. So, you know what? I'll take Jay Cutler. Fine. Do I love it? No, but we'll take it.
I always kind of feel like I should have rode with Matt Moore. I've always thought Matt Moore was kind of underrated, but then he did lose me money against the Steelers. And
I do think Matt Moore is good, but Jay Cutler has been a legit starter for years. Not a great starter, but
a starter nonetheless. Just like Colin Kaepernick, but that's a whole other discussion. All right, so let's talk about YouTube. I will let you take the floor on this, and I will just be either the devil's advocate, or I will just ask questions, because I don't really know, didn't do a lot. I didn't do nearly as much research on this, so I will let you take the floor. We are going longer than we hoped, but let's just try to talk about this for like 20 minutes.
Okay, so accordingly, YouTube has a generally, as far as speech-wise goes, a very good policy on what is and isn't acceptable on their platform. Generally, however, that is going to change very soon because they've decided to create a new limited state for videos that do not violate their terms of service, but that they think have a religious extremist or supremacist view on topics, and this will be decided by their YouTube Heroes community, who will be working with the ADL in order to flag these videos and essentially demonetize and remove them from general searching. So if you already view the creators of these videos, you can find them just fine, but the creators won't be able to monetize them. The creators will not be able to spread them at all because they will not be linked in any recommendations. They will not be more easily found. So essentially, basically unperson these videos is what YouTube is starting to do to videos that, once again, do not violate their terms of service, but do violate the tenets of the mob of people they've picked to go flag videos for fun.
Okay, so my first initial thought on this, and obviously this is clearly a free speech issue to a certain extent. Is this not though to stop like videos of people like committing suicide or like to like, because basically what happens is like ISIS moves a video up of like them cutting somebody's head off, and by monitoring this, you make it so that that doesn't get as popularized and things like. Obviously, again, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. So isn't the main concern about this the people that are making the choice and not necessarily that they're doing this itself? Because I think it's not necessarily a bad idea to monitor and demonetize certain sort of harmful propaganda-ist type of things, but it becomes an issue when it's somebody who's, say, left-leaning, who's then doing it with things that are right-leaning, right? Am I correct? Isn't that kind of the main issue? It's more of the people who are doing the watchdog instead of the actual watchdogging itself.
Do you know an individual named Jordan B. Peterson?
I do not.
He's a popular psychologist from Toronto who was recently flagged by the YouTube system for not violating any terms of service. Now, Jordan P. Peterson is a very uncontroversial figure. You know, he holds some views that might be viewed as controversial, but as far as like being he's not very controversial. Let me just put it that way. He kind of like he talks about like the Bible and how it applies and how men and women are different and things like that. Simple things, you know, things that generally are really well accepted but could be considered controversial. He had his entire YouTube channel taken down. He had access to his Gmail account revoked, so he couldn't get to his emails. He couldn't get to his YouTube account. And mind you, he makes like $50,000 a month to make YouTube videos.
Pretty good.
Yeah. So all these things were taken from him just for not violating the terms of service with no warning. You know, there was no like, oh, yes. And he had to basically the only reason he got his accounts back was because there was enough people outraged at him being removed from the platform.
Well, as they should be. I mean, that's outrageous. I mean, there's no denying that regardless of how we both think that he's a crackpot, I'm sure because neither of us are religious.
No, he's not that. He's not even that religious. He's a very interesting character.
But nonetheless, even if you do, that's still not legit. That still does not make it okay to silence him. He's not advocating for killing people. He's not advocating.
No, he's not advocating violence. He's not advocating for hate. He's not none of those things. But he was flagged by I think AI actually, and now they're going to move it to basically the Anti-Defamation League and a couple of people that they've determined are going around watching and flagging videos.
But again, this is about the not necessarily. Let's get back to the broader point. Do you think it's okay for YouTube to do this in general? If they can, because obviously, is it okay as a free speech issue to say that ISIS can't post these videos because technically it is free speech, right? What is your stance on that?
Personally, yes, I have to concede the point that yes, they are a private entity, they are a private company, and they are allowed to police their platform however they desire. What I don't like is that they're going to take videos that don't violate their terms of service, and they're going to, deplatform those videos without any recourse. The whole point of running their platform is the rules they establish should be followed. They should be followed and applied universally, or they should change their rules and show that they are not committed to free speech. Because what they're trying to do right now with this policy is they want all the benefits of looking like they support free speech without having to take some of the criticism of supporting free speech.
Yeah, and again, I'm completely in agreement on this. It's clearly wrong what they're doing. That's not the policy as it originally stood seemed to be fine. Obviously, you're going to have people posting videos of things that are absurd or obscene or terrible or violent, and you work to monitor that, and you have your policies and you stick with it. And it does seem, and I could see why somebody on the right would be nervous about things like this, because these organizations are probably I'm not saying this definitely because I don't know, but if I had to guess, I would assume that they are more on the left side of the political spectrum as far as their sensibilities.
Well, I want to elaborate this because, as we all know, YouTube is owned by Google, right?
Uh-huh.
And Google has publicly stated that they alter search results to not put the most popular or the most relevant topic. If it's a controversial issue that has a right-leaning bias, they will purposely put articles that debunk that at the top of search results in order to essentially deprogram people and have them think like people at Google think. They've admitted to doing this. And try this for anything. Try looking up "R the Donald," right? It's a subreddit on Reddit for Donald Trump supporters. One of the third article on the page will be the 538 article talking about the users on "R the Donald." That has nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm. And
right? Rather than the various thousands of posts they can put there a day.
And while as I am, a lovable socialist, that's not okay. It's not a good look for people on the left, because people on the left are supposed to be for free speech. And if you believe in your ideas, then you let your ideas stand, and you give people enough confidence in people that when they hear your ideas, they're going to agree with you and they're going to see that you're right. And I mean, just going back to strategy for Democrats, they've been horrible on this for so long. They've just never been able to champion their own beliefs and to be able to stand by their own principles, because they don't actually have principles. And obviously this isn't all Democrats. There's plenty of good working Democrats out there, just as there's plenty of good working Republicans. But in general, this is my frustration with the party at a national level. And this is something that Google should know better. They should know better, because they're supposed to be for a free internet, because free internet is the last sort of stand against big imperialistic powers, against corporate interests, against media news and mainstream, all of that. If you're going to be a free thinking individual, we have to have a free internet, or else all of a sudden it's just going to be people who fit into their camps, and that's horribly dangerous for democracy, for a variety of issues. So I think this is tremendously horrible. I don't know how you can possibly think, even if they are on your side more or less, how you can be okay with this going on.
Yeah, and as someone who doesn't consider myself right-leaning, considers myself just anti-leftist, anti-left, anti-authoritarian, anti-totalitarian, all these things, when I hear how much time that the younger generation, Generation Z, spends on the internet and how they get their information from Wikipedia. On Wikipedia, right, they say anyone can edit it, but if you're not one of their approved editors, they will immediately undo any edits you make to it. You have to be an approved Wikipedia editor that gets cleared by them.
Mm-hmm. So, which I'm also fine with for the sake of things, because there does need to be legitimacy there. There has to be. I think that there is an important distinction between weeding out fake news, like clearly fake, harmful articles that are just not true, and weeding out things that take a right-wing approach. And I think that that's ultimately, just to play devil's advocate a little bit here, I think that's ultimately what the intention is, because fake news on the left and the right is bad. There is an abundance of just bullshit on the internet. And these companies do realize that and do have to make sure that they weed through it. But what happens is these people come in with their biases, because everybody approaches everything with their biases, and they come into it and they end up doing too much in one direction or the other. And what we need is some centrist approach to this. We need some sort of we just need what's true, whether it's right-leaning or left-leaning. If they're coming at the issue with facts and then just interpreting those facts in a right or left-leaning way, that's politics. But both sides need to be present, or multiple sides or whatever, of an issue, for us to be educated about it. It's not about censoring us so that we just feel a certain way. That's not okay.
Well, to get back on the topic of Wikipedia, though, one of my issues is there was a controversy called Gamergate, and obviously you're not too informed on that. And it was just it was a little kind of like squad about ethics in journalism and people airing their dirty laundry live online. And the Wikipedia article quoted someone involved with the controversy saying, "Oh, it was about nothing," and used that as kind of the final say on the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and like, I mean, let's go ask Andrew Jackson. What was the taking
The Trail of
Trail of
Tears.
Tears? That was all about nothing, right? Let's go ask Andrew Jackson what his thoughts are on the Trail of Tears. That's like the equivalent of doing that. And I think if like Google was right leaning and Google would spend every day changing search results to make sure that you couldn't find things critical of Donald Trump, like was like they were just censoring every topic, I think people would be outraged and rightfully outraged.
Rightfully so, yeah.
It's not Google's job to be a political action committee for the Republican Party, just like it shouldn't be their job to be a political action committee for the left-wing parties.
Yeah, I agree, and I agree with that completely.
You know, the amazing thing is when you hear people call our current president a fascist, I just think, man, I'm trying to remember all the talk shows that were critical of Hitler, you know, and all the talk radio shows that were critical of Hitler or Mussolini during their rise to power, right?
Well, that's another topic for another time.
I know.
But yes, that's yeah, no, I think I agree, and we just can't have that. We have to have institutions have to do what they're supposed to do. They stay in their lane, goddammit. So yeah, I agree.
And I think that since they are private companies, I think the reality of what we have to do about this is that if we see an alternative platform that is truly committed to creating an honest and open place of ideas and an honest discussion, or a good search engine that's willing to eschew politics, I think we have to give those platforms a try. And we have to show that we do not want our information just culled by another corporation, just like we've all gotten sick of the news corporations telling us what they want us to think and pushing whatever the agendas are of the wealthy and powerful who own them. We need to, when we see platforms that are offering kind of a legitimate platform for these things, rather than just hearing our echo chamber of what we want to hear, we have to support these platforms and we have to give them a chance.
Yeah, and not be so quick to just jump into your camp's side of view. You know, if you're a Democrat, that's fine. If you vote Democrat, if you're a Republican, that's fine. But it doesn't mean that Republicans are right 100% of the time, or it doesn't mean that Democrats are right 100% of the time. And obviously,
they're usually exactly both wrong most of the time.
Yeah, usually they're both wrong. Exactly. So,
just like on gay marriage, they were both wrong on that issue.
So just parse through some things. I know it takes a little bit more time out of your day. I know that you have a lot, that we all have a lot going on. But these things are really important, especially like the last issue we talked about. It's really important to actually know what you're talking about. Because votes do matter, not necessarily on president as much, but on local officials, on state treasurer, and all of those things that you really can have an effect on. And it's just so important to know what you're talking about, to have some legitimacy, and to look for just crave legitimacy, to crave the real what's going on, and to not just want to be spoon-fed what you already believe. If something drastically changes your worldview, that's good. That is good as long as that thing that changes your worldview is legitimate. That's you should want your mind to be blown and your perspective to be changed. I don't know why we as a country, and I don't know if this is American or just human nature in general, just strive to just want to reinforce our own beliefs. I love it when my belief of something just drastically changed, but I guess not everybody's like that. So
as someone who lived in a foreign country for 3 months, I can tell you that seemed to me to be very, very common, is that people didn't want to have their perspective wildly changed. People kind of are very comfortable and having their biases reinforced or having their views and opinions shaped and, constantly reflected in the culture. It seemed like, in a culture very different than ours, that still fit in to that box.
Yeah, no, I think well, I mean, that's interesting. As someone who's never left the country, I can definitely say that Americans are stubborn about what they believe. But
I can tell you, the Japanese are also a very stubborn people that are very set in their ways in many ways.
Yeah. So again, that's just my plea. About our previous issue, try to be compassionate. About this issue, try to be informed. And don't accept, as you said, I completely do not accept just the status quo. As far as search platforms or anything, this is still a free internet. It hasn't been taken from us yet. And if you want some good intellectual discussion presenting both sides of the issue, you should visit Diploma Sports more.
Yep. Now that we're done with that topic, I do want to discuss one last thing.
Okay, let's go ahead.
It's kind of back to politics. So with Jim Justice switching parties in West Virginia to the Republicans, Now the Republicans control 35 governorships.
As they have been doing. That's the thing about Republicans are great politicians. You can say what you want about their beliefs. When Obama was elected in 2008, they organized to win all the governorships, to win all the state representatives, and that's why my previous point about getting involved in local leadership is important, because Republicans run everything right now. And I'm not even going to say, I don't even want to argue whether this isn't, why this is, but strategically, that's crazy. The 35 out of 50 belong now to the Republicans. That is obviously
isn't it
a staggering advantage.
14 because Gary Johnson is still governor of New Mexico.
Oh, right, fair enough, fair point. Yeah. Oh, is he still? It doesn't matter either way. But majority.
Yeah, but my point about the 35 governorships is that we may have a generational opportunity in front of us with one party controlling the majority of governorships. We could, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we could have a constitutional convention and institute term limits, could we not?
God, I didn't research on this. I didn't know we were going to be talking about this.
I didn't really.
Well, as far as like a constitution of the amendment, an amendment to the Constitution.
Yeah, we could do a constitutional amendment to introduce term limits. It could be a generational.
I think that is. I think just meander for a second. I'm going to look at requirements for constitutional amendment real quick while we're.
Sure. Our apologies. We will probably cut out this break in time.
Well, I don't know. It's kind of endearing too, and it sounds. See, we're doing this with you, as you should do. This is exactly when you're having these questions. You shouldn't just guess. You should actually then get on your phones, because everybody has a smartphone, and look up the answer, which is what we're doing. So see, we're just demonstrating by example how. Okay, never mind. I just read that. Now I'm just reading the history of the first Constitutional Convention. That's not good.
That's not going to get us anywhere. Somewhere I read is that now.
Okay, well, nonetheless, it's not as important. We don't need to know the specifics of it. If you're correct and that is something that we could do, are you suggesting term limits for congressmen, right?
Yes, absolutely. Say for the legislature. So
do we really want to go down this rabbit hole of discussing the concept? Oh, I guess, yeah, fine. We can just discuss term limits. I don't necessarily know if I'm for term limits. What I am for term limits. Let me rephrase that. I'm for term limits, but I'm for a restructuring of the whole way that we do it. I think it should be 2 6-year terms, and that's it, or something like that. 2 4-year terms. It should not be 2-year terms. That is the big error that I have with congressmen. And the reason that I have that is because the first year that you get elected, you are learning your job. Just like Donald Trump is still learning the job. It takes about a year to really learn any job, and let alone a job that's so complicated. So you take a year to learn the job. That second year, you're not even doing your job, you're fundraising. Then you get in, so you have another, and then you win another election. You have another 6 months or so to get stuff done, and then you're focusing on your election again. Now that we have a bought and paid for election system, it's just too short of time. They're making fundraising calls 4 hours out of their day, for most of the part. Most congressmen are. You're making fundraising calls every day. And while that is a reality, we can't have term limits that it's only 2 years. But if you have 4 years or 6 years.
Well, my discussion isn't just to say, hey, let's make term limits for, make them only do one.
Well, not only one, but even with 3, because then it's still the election cycle. The problem is the election cycle. The problem is that they have to constantly, rather than getting to work and having 3 to 4 years to do what they need to do, and then letting the voters decide on how they did, they basically don't have any time to actually do any real work. And that's why there's so much of a cluster there, because it's already campaign season now.
But also, here's the thing. If we take term limits and we put them in place, you know what that indirectly does?
Well, it eliminates the career politician.
No, what it takes power away from is money in politics.
But they would just buy out the one reason that I push back on that is
they have to keep buying new politicians every other year. They don't have a problem with that.
That's not the issue, though. These people have enough. The people that are influencing politics have enough money that they'll write checks every year for the rest of their lives and never feel a dent about it.
But you're disempowering it. You can't just have Maxine Waters sit there for 20 years. You can't have John McCain sit there for how many years? While he's dying of brain cancer.
I do agree. And I do agree with the idea of term limits, but I don't think that you actually solve any of the issue if you're just kicking out new congressmen every 6 years, but they still have to do an election every 2. I don't think you're actually going to solve the problem. I guess that's my issue with it. Is I think the real problem is the career politician, is the people who aren't there to serve their country for a couple of years and then go about their daily life like we romanticize politicians. But to eliminate that, you still wouldn't have an effective political class. So you would,
what would you think of 3 4-year terms and 2 6-year terms as the
no, that's fine. I'm fine with that.
so it's so for that way they can serve the same amount of years. They don't accumulate as much power so that they can just go and get a cushy lobbying job afterwards. So there's not a whole bunch of self-interested people getting these jobs.
Yeah, no, and I think all of that, I mean, aside from eliminating money in politics and overturning Citizen United and all of that, which is a whole other discussion for another time, other than getting the corruption out of politics, there is some way, that is the way to do it, is term limits. I mean, it's the only other method that we have. But do you really think Republicans would do that, considering they control the branches of government? Why would they? What is the incentive politically for Republicans to call for this?
The incentive? I think it's a very popular measure.
But it doesn't help either side. It's not like Republicans or Democrats gain from this happening. So how,
they do. They gain having pushed a very popular policy, as we've shown with the last 8 years now of Obamacare. What happens when you push a very unpopular policy and people see the consequences of it?
Agreed. But I guess I think you're kind of overestimating how much this would affect people's perception of either. I don't even think people understand what term limits are. And maybe I'm thinking that the American public at large is not as intelligent or maybe I'm not giving them as much credit, but I just don't see politically, strategically, it wouldn't make sense for me if I was a Republican serving to advocate for this. But as you said, to governors, it would make more sense, I guess, because then they would be able to do it behind Congress's back.
And also, it takes power away from the federal government and improves their power. That's the other reason, is that it would improve state power and decrease federal power.
Well, it's an interesting thought. I certainly there's a fair amount of things I think we actually do need a constitutional convention for, and I could certainly understand term limits being one of them. But as I said, I don't think you solve anything.
Convince Congress to vote themselves out of office. That's insane.
Yeah, agreed. But as I said too, I just don't think 2-year terms make sense in any way, shape, or form. How they stand right now, or with term limits, they just don't make sense. It doesn't make sense to have.
But that's what you can do with the Constitutional Convention, is that you can change the Constitution.
Agreed, and that would be. There's a lot of things that we need to change. The Constitution, like the Bible, should be looked at as something that was written several hundred years ago, and not as something that's this holy document that can never be wrong.
I disagree with you on the Constitution. I think there are some parts of it that should never change. I think.
Well, no, and that's fair. But I'm just saying, in general, like, we should be able to look at the Constitution and say, like, why do we need the Third Amendment still? I mean, it's just
we will not house soldiers without proper duty course. That's what it is, right?
Yes, that is what it is. Exactly. Yeah, it's not.
We cannot be required to house soldiers. What's wrong with that?
So yeah. So I mean, it's just in summation, I can agree with that. I can agree with that general concept. Anything else you want to touch on?
No, I think that kind of covers all the issues of the day. I'm excited to see how the Awan issue plays out with Miss Curly Hair in Florida. I'm excited to see what'll happen.
I don't think I have any idea. I don't know what you're talking about, but it doesn't matter. We don't need to get into it.
Yeah, it's not that important.
Yeah, I think this was a pretty good discussion. Let's wrap it up.
As always, you can find us on our various social media platforms at Diploma_sports on Twitter, Minds, and Gab. And, of course, find us on Facebook, Diploma Sports, and WordPress, diplomasports.wordpress.com. So, take us out, SC.
All right. And, again, to everybody, stay informed. Don't be afraid to hear another side of the argument that may contradict your worldview. It's very important that we all stay fresh in these very tumultuous times politically. And just remember to stay informed and also stay civil, because despite disagreeing with people, it does not give you the right to hate them or to incite violence on them. That is all. Thank you for listening. And again, we want to get the conversation going. So please leave us comments if you disagree with what I'm saying, if you want to call me a jackal or whatever. I'm okay with that. I don't know if anybody calls anybody a jackal anymore, but just in case, if you want to do that, that is perfectly fine. We welcome your comments. We welcome your arguments and discussions. The best thing you can do to learn is to talk to people. So thank you, everybody, for listening, and have a great day.
Have a great one.